This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. This is a message, a podcast from Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley, your voice of Respectonomics. And I need to say that this particular presentation is coming to you without my co-host, Sarah Benton. Most people would say she's not the co-host. She is the manager, the director, and the chair of the board. I think I agree with that. So we don't have Sarah with us this morning. Today you have Jeremy, and I'd like to welcome you, wish you well, whatever time of the day, wherever you may be. These messages, these Compass Point series are universal. They are international. This one is called Lost in the Jungle. Lost in the Jungle. I think most of us would agree that we have never actually been lost in the jungle. We've read reports and magnificent stories of people who have been lost in the jungle, usually the result of an airplane crash or something, and how they've survived, and the incredible strength, the vitality, the ingenuity of the human being. This one, called Lost in the Jungle, is one that addresses us personally. I'd like to give you one personal comparison authentically, and that is I have, mind you, only once been what's called turned around. And when you're turned around, it happened in a snowstorm. It sounds almost ridiculous because I was moving in the middle of a snowstorm. The hydro had gone out. I went from the house to the hydro pole to check on the breaker switch there. And the breaker switch was fine. I turned around, and that is in fact when I got turned around. And when you're turned around, it is a terrifying, panicky feeling. I mean, we're talking a distance of 100 meters between the pole and the house. And how you can get turned around, you can't see the hydro pole, you can't see the hydro lines, you can't see the trees and the bushes and all the usual markings that tell you which way to go. And you, as I say, get turned around. But I had one advantage in being turned around, and that is I knew I was lost. Now, mind you, it took a bit of time for me to figure out which way to go and so on, and I did. But I want to emphasize one thing here. To be lost in the jungle is one issue. To be turned around is another one. But I knew I was turned around. And the question that we address today is lost in the jungle. And that is, do I know whether I'm lost in the jungle? In other words, a very personal question, whether I'm lost in the jungle. And I want to talk about being lost in the jungle because there are three components to it. The first one is, in fact, dealing with this very straightforward point. Am I lost in the jungle? I don't think most people would be standing at a subway stop or getting into an airplane or going into a restaurant and would say, am I lost in the jungle? But the truth of the matter is, many of us, certainly in the business and political climate, we are in fact lost in the jungle. We do not have clear direction, even with a compass in our hand. It's always said that if you have a compass in your hand that you can see where you're going. Well, the truth of the matter is, if you don't know where you're going, the compass isn't very helpful. And if you don't know where you are, the compass is even less helpful. So the issue here is that to be lost in the jungle is both a corporate, excuse me, and it's a political context or dimension. And the cruel truth is that being lost in the jungle without actually recognizing it is in fact that parasitical character of how many corporations and many politicians operate. They would prefer that we do not realize that we are lost. So our first reference point is to look up and to recognize we may be lost. And it is also worth remembering or looking into, why are we lost? What is the reason? Why do we feel lost? And we feel lost because we're not included. We feel like there's this sort of vapor around us. It's like a sort of carbon dioxide. It's heavier than air, and it suppresses us, and it keeps us away from who we really are. So this isn't just an idle moral discussion about being lost in the jungle. It has an incredible vitality to it, meaning, in other words, it affects our lives and our potential and our creativity. And from a corporate and a political standpoint, let's be brutally frank that to have a lost population, to have a lost community, to have a lost group of people is in fact, aside from the morality, is in fact an incredible waste, a dereliction of human capacity and human potential. We have this extraordinary potential, and our responsibility is, in a community sense, to bring it out of one another. And when we find that we are being suppressed or oppressed or abused, it's almost like we're being in a sort of modern day slave trade, that we're being operated in this atmosphere of almost like one of negligence, where you're really, really not being included. So the first point of reference is to look up and to find out whether, in fact, we are lost in the jungle or not. Now, when you're lost in the jungle, there's an old acronym called STOP, S-T-O-P, which stands for, the S stands for stop, the T stands for think, the O stands for organize, and the P stands for plan. And I think these are probably great credentials in many respects. And if one is truly lost in the jungle, those are metrics that would make a lot of sense. But the part I want to emphasize here is that when we are in the jungle, when we recognize that we are lost, when we think that we have no sense of direction, we are turned around. One of the things to do in the jungle, anyway, is to look for a supply of water. And the reason you do that is because water always leads to civilization. Water is, of course, the grounding, well, there's a good word, grounding for humanity. So that if you follow the water, you will eventually come to some kind of encampment, some kind of community. But here's the difficulty in both the corporate and the political worlds. And I'm throwing down the gauntlet here because I think a lot of us, being lost, when we recognize we're lost, cannot even see that stream of water. We cannot see the flow. And that, I think, is odd, sometimes intentional. Sometimes it might be out of negligence. Let's not get into finger pointing. But if we can't see that line of water, if we can't see that flow, we don't have the opportunity to reconnect with the other parts of the community. And if that is the case, that line of water that we're talking about, I keep referring to it as a line, meaning, in other words, the line of communication has been obscured. We can't see it. It's been covered in undergrowth, it's been covered in bloat, it's been covered with abuse, it's been covered with all kinds of intentions that are frankly dishonorable. We need to be able to see that line of communication, that line of water. We need to be able to walk alongside it. We need to be safe with that line of communication. And corporations, politicians, governments need to make sure that those flows of water are abundantly and easily clear to all the people who are around it. And as I follow this body of water, so we've now recognized that I was lost, but now I can find myself through this following of water. And I follow the water. The company has made it very clear where my line of communication is. But can you imagine, take that sort of fable of the being lost in the jungle and you eventually come into an encampment. And when you get to that encampment, you find out that they're all talking a foreign language and they haven't got a clue who you are. They don't even understand you. And they may not actually be that interested in you. Who knows? But the trouble is that when you're not recognized, when you don't have a proper communication on a one-on-one basis, it is very disheartening. Imagine coming out of the jungle, coming to this encampment, and then actually finding out that the people there can't communicate with you. And isn't that the case so often in our political and in our corporate orbits, that we get to this group of people and it's as though they're talking a foreign language. It's as though they don't actually care about us. It's as though we don't belong. This is a huge mistake. It's all based on silos. It's based on all kinds of self-interest and self-entitlement, and we can go through all the big words. But if you're running the corporation, if you're running the government, let's put one card on the table. Take people out of the jungle for a start. When they are in the jungle and they are lost, show them the way. And you show them the way by good communication. And when you get to that encampment, where you get them to the place where they need to be, then you want to be assured that those people at that encampment are the people who will talk the same language, will take the same visions, the same objectives, the same goals, and join you together. Now let's take this lastly to its almost to its conclusion. We've talked about this almost from the standpoint of the correlation between an employee and management. But in actual fact, this being lost in the jungle applies across the board. How many of us, as customers, have called into a corporation to have something fixed and have found that we have become lost in the jungle? And that being lost in the jungle at one level is endemic. If it's lost in the jungle to the shareholder or to the supplier or to the customer or to the employee, all four participate in this sense of being lost. It is not something that can be confined to one area. If we have a lost in the jungle perspective or even an attitude in one segment, it is axiomatic, it's mathematical, in fact. It's like plumbing. Water goes to its natural level. And when water is leaking in one container, it will leak into another. So that, in other words, the lost in the jungle isn't just a moral case. It is a case of recognizing that if one group is lost, so may other groups be lost as well. And which one of us, in either a political or a corporate, a business, community standing, who would ever say that we want our customers to be lost? Can you imagine saying, we want to be lost of our customers, we want to be lost of our shareholders, we want to be lost of our employees, we want to be lost of our suppliers? Because if we get lost of any one of those, the business will fail. So we need to give the directions back to the people, show them that they are not lost. If they feel lost, then it is incumbent on us as individuals, as corporations, as leaders, as fellow human beings to draw alongside. We recommend the voice of Respectonomics to tell us, remind us one thing, that our proposal is to restore the dignity of the human being. And what greater dignity can we confirm upon another when we can show people a way to letting them reach their potential and to allow their creativity to bloom? These are not just idle words. They are words of truth. And I'm asking people to hear the word, to spread it around. Press your share button and tell people that we need our leadership in whatever corridor we're referring to. We need our leadership to draw us out of the jungle, to draw us out of our lost position, and to give us the direction and the goal, the purpose of everything that we are intended to be. That's the message. Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. Jeremy is your voice of Respectonomics and can be reached at jeremy@respectonomics.com. Thank you so much for listening.